You know, we tend to move through the world seeing everything as separate. A tree is a tree, a rock is a rock, a person is a person. But what if that's not the whole story? What if that's just a story we've been telling ourselves? We're about to dive into a different way of seeing things, a way of learning to read the world not as a bunch of separate objects, but as this incredible web of deep, ancient interconnection.
This one line, this is really our starting point. It hints that all those places we think are empty or quiet are actually, well, they're brimming with meaning. They're full of conversations that we just haven't learned how to hear yet. It's basically an invitation to lean in, to look closer, and to listen a whole lot deeper.
And that brings us to the big question for our whole journey, right? How do we actually do that? How do we tune ourselves into these other languages, the languages that exist way beyond human speech? How in the world do we learn to listen to moss and trees, and maybe even stones?
So, our journey is going to start in a place that looks about as silent and still as it gets, a sphagnum bog. It's right here, a place where a biologist's ashes were scattered, that a completely new way of seeing starts to open up. One that finds this incredible flurry of activity in what looks like total quiet. Okay, so this just flips the script on how you think about moss. We see it as this, soft, passive carpet on the ground, but sphagnum moss is a powerful architect. It literally engineers its own environment. It can hold 20 times its own weight in water, and it takes in everything that falls into it, pollen, bugs, you name it. And yes, even the carbon atoms of a biologist, translating them bit by bit into the body of the bog itself.
So from the bog's point of view, death isn't really an end. It's a translation. A life's entire pattern just continues, but in a totally new form. I mean, that completely shatters our whole idea of where one life stops and another one starts.
All right, from the surface of that bog, we're going to go even deeper now, down into the hidden world right under the forest floor. Because down there's another kind of profound, totally unseen connection that's at work all the time.
You might have heard people call this the Wood Wide Web or the underground internet. Well, this is the real deal. It's not just a cute metaphor, it is a physical reality. We're talking about billions of tiny fungal threads, they're called hyphae, that link trees together in this massive, incredibly resilient web that's been around for over 400 million years.
And what this reveals is something amazing. A forest isn't just a bunch of individual trees all competing with each other for sun and water. No, it's a complex, cooperative system. The bigger, older trees, the mother trees, they actually use this network to feed the little seedlings growing in their shade, sending them sugar. They can even send out chemical warnings to their neighbors about, say, an insect attack.
And this leads us to the network's own point of view, which is that the boundary between the fungus and the tree, or between one organism and another, it's basically an illusion. This idea of separation is just a story we tell ourselves. The reality is connection. It's the fundamental way the world actually works. Okay, so we've been thinking about connection across space. Now let's completely shift gears and think about connection across time, and I mean deep, deep time. And our guide for this part of the journey is just a single granite boulder, a rock left behind by a glacier during the last ice age.
2 billion years.
Just try to let that number sink in. That's how old this granite is. It's a number so huge our minds can't really even process it. It was formed under pressures and temperatures that don't even exist on Earth's surface anymore. Holding that number in your head, it just creates this humbling contrast with our own tiny little lifespans. And this timeline, this is where it gets really wild. This puts it all in perspective. The lichens growing on the surface of this rock, they started growing before the United States was even a country. Our entire recorded human history is just a flicker, a blink of an eye in the life of this one stone. So the stone has a lesson for us. It teaches us about scale. We are these brief, hot, metabolic flames burning through time. The stone, it's an enduring state, and its indifference isn't cruel. It's a kind of wisdom reminding us that our frantic, hurried pace isn't the only way to exist in time.
But this web of interconnection, it's not all about beautiful growth and ancient wisdom. It also means we're tied to the hard stuff. We're tied to destruction and loss. And that brings us to a much tougher lesson, one about the changing nature of fire and how we're dealing with ecological damage.
It is so critical to understand this. Not all fire is the same. For thousands of years, forests grew up with regular, low-intensity fires that were actually a healthy part of the whole cycle. But after a century of us putting out all those natural burns, you combine that with a hotter, drier climate, and suddenly we've created a whole new kind of fire, a monster that moves too fast, burns too hot, sterilizes the soil, and can stop a forest from ever coming back.
And if you give fire a voice, you can see its side of the argument. It's not some evil villain, it's a process. And we, because of our fear and our actions, we have dangerously changed the rules of that process. We turned a partner into something that now feels like an enemy.
And all of this leads to a feeling that you've probably had, even if you didn't have a word for it. Solastalgia. It's the pain you feel watching your home change for the worse right in front of your eyes. It's that feeling of being homesick for a place that is disappearing while you're still living there.
So, after journeying through this web of connection, feeling the scale of deep time, and facing this real, profound ecological grief, we get to the final, most important question. In a world like this, an interconnected and grieving world, how are we supposed to respond? What can we even do?
And the answer that's proposed here isn't some giant technological fix. It's something much quieter, much more personal. When you're faced with destruction on a scale that feels totally overwhelming, the simple act of just paying attention, of truly seeing and bearing witness to what is happening, that itself becomes a powerful reciprocal act. It's a gift of your presence.
And here, a fallen oak tree offers one last piece of wisdom. The forest doesn't really mourn. The forest incorporates. It takes everything back in. So death gets reframed not as an end, but as the ultimate act of giving back to the network, a continuation of the whole cycle. Falling isn't failure. It's just the next phase of the gift.
And we end on this final, provocative thought to chew on. Maybe your focus shouldn't be on the finished product. You know, the stable ecosystem, the perfect web of life. Maybe the real meaning is found in the dynamic, messy, ongoing process of it all. The creation, the connection, the participation. Not the web, but the weaving. And what does it mean for us to be a part of that weaving?